Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Memory Lab Models, which is the first webinar in a series of 8 webinars intended to help build and strengthen a network of memory labs in California. Many thanks to the California State Library for supporting the series and for establishing a new CopyCat grant program to build and support memory labs in the state. We're really excited to be here. My name is Pamela Vadakan. I'm Director of California Revealed, which is a California State Library initiative that helps public libraries and other local heritage organizations digitize, preserve, and make available online collections related to state history. And I'm joined here by Allison Ryan, who's one of our digital services librarians from California Revealed. And I know Siobhan, Shahed Dilashahi and Willow Germs, they're in the chat. I know they're here, but I don't think their video's on, so they can just say hi in the chat. So we have some other California Revealed team members here as well, who you'll meet later throughout the series. And also our special guest, I'm joined here by Siobhan Hagan, yay! Hi. Who is our Memory Lab Network project manager based out of the DC Public Library. She manages a cohort of 15 libraries across the state, 4 here in California. And she's collected an amazing amount of invaluable resources and guidelines that the CopyCat grant toolkit's based on. And also she designed the training that's the foundation for this webinar series. So I just want to thank Siobhan for the foundation and for joining us today. Thank you, welcome.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I'm so happy to be here today with you all. I'm actually 3 hours in the future because I'm located on the East Coast. So I am, as Pamela mentioned, the Memory Lab Network Project Manager. And we're going to talk a little bit more about our Memory Lab at DC Public Library. But the Memory Lab Network Project, just have to say, is a IMLS, that stands for Institute of Museum and Library Services. You probably all know that, but just in case, it's a national leadership grant through IMLS. So we have been so lucky and are so grateful for their funding and support to help build memory labs across the US. And 4 of those, 15, including DCPL, 15 libraries that are going to either have memory labs or are going to, 4 of those are located in California. And I know Jonathan's here today. He's one in our second cohort. So my background is in film and video production, but I also got a history minor when I did my undergrad. And when I realized I didn't want to work in the entertainment industry, I moved and went to graduate school in the Moving Image Archiving and Preservation program that Pamela also attended in New York. And so I'm a moving image archivist by training, and I have a lot of experience at a lot of different organizations, from an aquarium to a small single screen art house cinema to a large university preservation unit in California. And now a public library in our nation's capital. So I have a lot of experience, but I am fully aware that we're all learning, and I have a lot to learn. So I'm really excited to get to know you all and learn more about your experiences and from your backgrounds. So just really excited to be here and tell more about memory labs and the network.
Awesome. And so Siobhan's going to give an overview of the traditional memory lab model that's set up specifically at DC Public Library as a place for the public to do their own digitization. And then I'm going to touch on curbside a little bit, which is sort of the latest development due to COVID this year. Some libraries are doing that. And then Siobhan's going to go back then to the remote models, which I know some of you are proposing, so which is really great. And I also know that there's some folks here who are bringing a new model of planning to circulate scanners in the community, which is really exciting and awesome. And I look forward to talking more about that model during this series and our meetings. So just to note that we're going to save questions at the end. So please use this handy Zoom Q&A box that Allison's going to be watching. I mean, feel free to chat too and leave comments there, and move the questions over to the Q&A. It'll just be a little bit easier for us to track. But I'm really glad that so many of you all are here. It's awesome. So this series was designed to support a cohort of specifically of public libraries who received the CopyCat grants from the state library this year to set up a memory lab. But we also welcome those of you here who have received funding from other sources like the National Memory Lab Network. And then also anyone who's interested in starting a memory lab's welcome. So you may want to apply for a CopyCat grant in the future. We're all here learning together. And I really wish we had time to go around and introduce ourselves, but just keep talking in the chat. And I do hope that in addition to this webinar series, we'll have time to get together informally every now and then, just to kind of check in how you're doing with your planning. I'm happy to coordinate regional mentorships. So just let me know if you're interested in being a mentee or a mentor. And also Siobhan has a Slack space set up, which is like an online, it's basically like a sophisticated chat application, but you can also like send documents, and there's a lot of exchange happening there. And I'm really excited to sign, additional folks there. And yeah, there's like ongoing webinars through the Memory Lab Network. So there's a community already here that we'll build upon.
Sorry, there's a siren. So we know there's an overwhelming need for digital archiving services in every community. And I think you guys probably, you're all here, like we know this. We don't have to even talk about that so much. But just to reiterate, especially for the Memory Lab Network, our motto is preservation to the people. So preservation tools and knowledge should not be a privilege. Public libraries are perfectly positioned, I think, to take on the shared responsibilities of co-teaching digitization skills, preservation skills, and helping to save public memory. We use the word co-teach. We're going to use that because setting up a memory lab is not out of the box. There's going to be troubleshooting, partnerships, talking with other people. We also must balance our standards of best practice in the archival world and balance that with public need. We're here to learn from our communities, and we're here to learn from each other. No matter where you are in your planning, please bring your skills and bring your experience from wherever to the table so we can share resources and tips and help each other and support each other through the process, because we're gonna need it. That's my dog. In the still new field of personal digital archiving documentation, shared information is really vital. Although every community is different, many challenges are very similar. And this has been revealed through the Memory Lab Network, through our training, and through the Slack channel as well, through collaborating and hearing what people who are maybe a little further along in the process, what they've learned, what they've come up against, and how they've maybe come up with solutions for that problem, or people have really great ideas to throw their way. So sharing information is so key, and making sure that we're not repeating each other's mistakes and only repeating the successes. So this map here that you're looking at shows the National Memory Lab Network today. And this is our, as I said, 15 public libraries that are in two different cohorts. We sort of divvied it up as funding came in from IMLS. So we have a first cohort and a second cohort, but these are all of them. And this includes, as you can see, the Karuk Tribal Library, Los Angeles Public Library, Tehama County Library, and Tulare County Library, which I know Todd's here and Jonathan is here from Tehama and Tulare. So now it's important to note that Also, the different, while these pins are here, this doesn't necessarily mean that there is a memory lab located at this place quite at this moment. It's more like there's a lot that is still, all of these libraries are in different phases of their opening, and or obviously with the pandemic, most labs are closed even if they were built and up and running for a while. So just to let you know that there might not be a fully operational memory lab at each one of these pins, but there will be. Next slide.
Yeah, and I just wanted to acknowledge, as Siobhan mentioned, we have the 4 libraries who received Memory Lab Network funding. And then in addition, we have several libraries who've gotten LSTA funding in the past. So the blue dots represent the libraries Siobhan just mentioned, the Karuk Tribal Library, Tulare County, Tehama County, and Los Angeles Public Library. And then the orange points are the folks that have gotten LST funding in the past, who I know of. I think I'm probably missing some, so if anyone here knows of other labs, please let me know and we'll add them to the map and have them join up for all of our resource sharing and Slack and everything. And then the new folks who have gotten CopyCat grants this year, congratulations for those of you who are here. It's really exciting. Hey. Alameda County Library, Butte County Library, Glendale Library Arts and Culture, Napa County Library, and OC Public Library. So this is great. It's really wonderful to have so many folks here in California, so many memory labs. And again, I just wanted to show everybody here that there are several webinars planned in this series that will run for about 8 months, 1 per month, through the grant period specifically to help support those of you who got a CopyCat grant. But really these are meant, they're open to everybody and they kind of build upon each other toward this goal of opening a memory lab in the fall. If, this is the big if libraries are able to open, but really this will help anyone with planning and setup. And we encourage you to pull samples from your library's collections. You don't necessarily need to open to the public, but we're just hoping this training will kind of motivate you to continue working on your labs. Even if it won't be open to the public, there's still a lot you can do behind the scenes, as many of you all know. So depending on where you are in your process, you're totally welcome to pop into any of these webinars. We're going to record them. We are recording them so you can watch them later. And you can follow this link, californiarevealed.org/memorylabs. That's where all the recordings will be. We'll post resources there, as well as the slides for each session. So just keep an eye out for that. And again, I wanted to give a deep appreciation for Siobhan's deep dive training, which is what this training is based on. So if you want to go even further beyond just these sessions and our homework assignments, please feel free to follow that link there. There's so much available. And I did want to acknowledge that this online training is a little bit of an experiment because the traditional training includes webinars and a boot camp, maybe 2 to 3 days of hands-on exercises and then field trips, visiting different institutions and their digitization setups. So this is kind of these are illustrations of what could be and will be hopefully in the future when we'll be able to get together, set up test equipment, reshell some cassette tapes, as you can see there in the middle picture, and then hopefully digitize a tape or 2 together, which I think is really important to experience as a group, right? And the good and the bad, the troubleshooting, all that fun. So yeah, I look forward to that part. In the meantime, here we are. But I know that we'll be together again at some point. So I did mention that we have a little bit of homework for the next session. And there is going to be a planning document that many of you all, I think, especially those of you who've already proposed, and gotten funding for your memory lab, A lot of this will be cut and paste, but I really do want to encourage you all to start, consider it like a working document that starts to sketch out answers to these questions. What are your community needs? What histories are valuable to your community? What are your library's biggest challenges to build, manage, and sustain the lab? And then what are your biggest strengths to meet those challenges, hopefully. So please start to consider these questions this morning too, as Siobhan's going through the different models. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to touch more on these different questions and different areas of planning for the next session in February.
Great. And just as and sort of one thing about that questionnaire and homework for folks like Tahama and Tulare, who already kind of started that process with us in the network, use this time now. I think it's still a good practice to really evaluate where you're at and reflect on how things have changed since we had our in-person boot camp about a year ago now. And so much is different. So how are things going? How are you adapting your plan? And, especially now that things are closed. So it's still a great practice to go back, I think, and look at that and think about planning. So since the beginning, the Memory Lab model at DCPL has included not only digitization equipment, but digital preservation education for the public as well. And then also online resources, in-person workshops, and now virtual workshops and other programming. Communities really need both the resources and advisors to support the iterative process that is archiving. I'm going to speak about the setup that we have at DC Public Library to give you a sense of the traditional on-site stationary model. And at the end, we'll touch upon modified models that accommodate curbside services, which I have less knowledge of, but we're also working on building mobile or pop-up services within the network. Next slide, thanks. Just as a real quick how it started, how it's going, gotta give a shout out to Janie Mears, pictured here, and you probably can't read it at the bottom, but it says, "I don't look scared," right? And this is her first day working at DC Public Library as a National Digital Stewardship resident. And Janie is the one that researched and built and tested out the DC Public Library Memory Lab back in 2015 and 2016. So we applied for, I was not at the library at that time, but Lauren Algie, who's now at the Library of Congress, she was a digital curation librarian at DC Public Library and partnered with the head of the labs department at the time, Nick Korolchik, and they wrote a grant asking for an NDSR resident to build a memory lab, and they received it. And so Janie stayed for a year at DCPL, and the memory lab opened in February of 2016 at our central downtown Washington, DC library branch, Martin Luther King Jr. Library. And so then Jamie was around for a few more months to evaluate and write up a full report on the memory lab and how it was doing. So there is a blog that Jamie wrote while she was a resident that has a lot of resources and is really interesting to see the journey that she had in building this. And then we're going to send that along to you. But then there's also an overall report about about everything and all of her work that we also have on our website that you could check out too. So after it was a success, the memory lab at DCPL, then we, being Lauren and Nick again, applied for and received a national leadership grant through IMLS to build the memory lab network and then take this model out to other public libraries, but with not just the idea of building these, memory labs, but then also putting together resources and that would help others to build memory labs, not outside of the network. So that's why I'm particularly so excited to be working with Pamela to be expanding this work and to be really kicking the tires of our resources that we're building and seeing how they work. So really relying on you all to also help build this model and to help put more memory labs out there, or whatever you want to call them, whether it's a memory lab or a retro lab or whatever. And we've got the WordPress blog right there in the chat. Thank you, Pamela. So the lab, the physical digitization lab, opened at our central branch, like I mentioned, in February of 2016. But then in April of 2017, that library closed for renovation. So we moved the memory lab to the Northeast Neighborhood Library branch. And this was the best we could do in the moment. It's not great to have it at a neighborhood library branch, but this was the most centrally located. It's near it's maybe slightly, it's about 10 minutes away from Union Station, which is a major hub, public transportation hub. So that was one of the reasons why it was chosen. But it's a small library branch, right? So fitting that into that space where spaces are already sparse. So they put it actually on the wall of their computer lab space. And basically, which was also in viewing distance and very close by to the reference desk. So also I need to say, obviously the memory lab at TCPL is closed right now due to the pandemic, and it closed in March of 2020, like many of our libraries. And it was then moved in August 2020 to the renovated MLK Library branch, which is fully renovated now, and it is still, the memory lab though is still closed. So just to keep that in mind, that we haven't opened it yet, and I haven't actually seen it yet, the newer renovated memory lab. So initially, there have been two ways that DCPL has kind of built their memory lab and run their memory lab. And one is with one station, and one station for both AV and the big fancy scanner that does photo, documents, slides, and negatives. And then when we moved it to Northeast, we actually had two stations. So we had two computers, and they could be reserved separately. And you could work on, one was for your AV material like VHS, VHS-C, DV, mini DV, audio cassette. And then the other one was more for photo, document, slides, and negative scanning. And then we do have a floppy disk that you could, 3.5-inch floppy disk reader that you could use on either one of them, honestly, to just transfer over any files from a 3.5-inch floppy. So that is, those were the two stations for the longest time. And that's the memory lab that I initially got to know very well. And you book this through an online reservation system. At the new renovated space, I'm told that it's going to actually just be one station again. But there's definitely these different ways to do it. And you could maybe start with one and then scale up to two stations potentially. But I'm a little scared, not scared, but sort of reticent of having only one at DCPL, because within a month of opening at MLK, it was booked 2 months in advance. So if we had two stations, it would be that maybe we'd only be booked 1 month in advance, right? So because these are very time-consuming workflows, they are 3-hour sessions, and you can also have a 1 hour, what we call drop-ins, but they're more orientations, which I'll talk more about later, that happen approximately weekly when everything's open, obviously. So this is time consuming stuff, right? So having 2 stations would, if maybe you open one station and you see how long or how popular it is, and if it's really popular, then open up the second, so which has worked for us at DCPL. The VHS deck and the scanner are our most used and most popular pieces of equipment in our memory lab by far. Anecdotally, our typical users are retirees, creatives, either as a hobby or creative professionals, and then stay-at-home parents. At Northeast Library, it was a small do-it-yourself DIY space in a computer lab, as I mentioned, and it was managed by the branch staff. So whoever was at the desk on that day, they were the one in charge of the memory lab, and it was coordinated with lab staff. And then when I joined on, I assisted as well if there was any troubleshooting needed. The lab hours, appointments, and what we call drop-ins, the lab hours are by appointment, and the drop-ins are also by appointment. So that's why I don't like to call them drop-ins, because you can't actually just drop in and then use the memory lab. So they're more like an orientation where it's 1 hour, maximum of 4 attendees, and the librarian walks you through using each piece of equipment in the lab and answers any questions that you have. Many of our partners in the network require an orientation. And while we did not, in order for you to use the lab and sign up for your own appointment, we did not require that initially with at DCPL, but we're moving to that model when it reopens. And I really recommend it. While it's more, it is work to do the 1 hour orientation every week. And we do it actually like twice a week, some weeks, where it's like a Wednesday morning and then a Saturday morning. For people who work, you have the Saturday, and for people who might be retired or don't, go into work, Wednesdays are popular. So that, is work up front for the librarian, but it's going to save a lot of questions, and it's just going to make your users feel more confident as well. But just keep in mind that you have to keep track of this information, right? Like if someone attends an orientation, you need to have that somewhere in a database, or for us, we use our scheduling system has all this information about our customers. If they've attended an orientation, then we'll know, so we can say, oh, cool, you are cleared to schedule your own appointment. And then, you also have to keep track of other aspects like their waivers, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Next slide. Do it yourself means we need really good instructions. And these are online in our LibGuide, our Memory Lab LibGuide, which the URL is at the top of this slide. And particularly, you would click on In the Lab tab there, and then choose what format you're digitizing. And then it's just very detailed step-by-step instructions. We also include in the Resources tab, we have best practices and class like notes and resources for physical preservation and digital preservation, links to free tools and other resources for personal archiving, really. It has been very difficult, and this was particularly, Jamie mentions a lot, of weighing archival best practice against what the public needs and what they want in terms of file quality and encoding. Building preservation into digitization is a big part of what we try to do in the step-by-step guides. So, everything from like embedding minimum amount of metadata into a file, teaching about file naming, quality file naming, and why it's important. But you can really only do so much, once they walk out the door, or even when they walk in the door and are at the lab. Like, you can only do so much. They might be like, I'm not putting that information in my file. I don't need that. Another thought about this, while it's great to have this all online and accessible to all people outside of the lab, so they can kind of get to know, like, oh, okay, this is what I'll be doing. It's could be good too to print out your workflows and have them in a binder. So if you update them, then you just have to remember to update the binder. But it is nice if you're working on the computer and you're digitizing and running programs and things like that. So having the binder so that you aren't kind of clicking back and forth. And some folks just really prefer to have a physical copy of things while they're going through it. So it's something to think about. And just want to reiterate, also, while we have all these resources here, I would like to point out that if you go to memorylabnetwork.org, and we also have a resources tab there, and there is just sort of an overwhelming amount of resources there. But please take a look if you're feeling, brave and want some more information about everything about our memory lab, how it was built, any report that was done on it, and then also for the Memory Lab network too. And we have like video tutorials as well. So if you want to see how to reshell a cassette tape, we have a tutorial on that. So it's a deep dive also that we have that Pamela mentioned. And that is sort of just like walking you through the steps, very, very detailed, but you could jump around and kind of like perhaps learn some new things. Then I think we're probably gonna send a bunch of resources at the end of this too, but don't forget Jamie's WordPress blog. And just wanna emphasize that sharing our experiences, our failures, what we did wrong, what we broke, that's part of this. It is part of the learning experience. It's part of building a memory lab. Do not expect it to go perfectly. There is no way that it's going to. Expect the unexpected. So, and embrace not knowing things, and embrace having to just sit with something not working and then trying something to fix it one by one. Next slide. So, we don't have control, like I said, over when they leave the memory lab. It's they've got these files on their external hard drive, right? And they are, we just don't know what exactly they're going to do with them. So that's why it really is I say that there are the three legs of the stool of a memory lab, and this is one of them, the programming. So we have classes and events that we require our network partners to do this, but this is also required within DCPL. So the classes that we have created so far, the first three that are listed here, Digital Preservation 101, Digital Estate Planning, and Digital Archiving and Social Media, those were developed by Jamie in her residency because she found that absolutely was a core part of the DCPL Memory Lab model. And she tested the curricula and also trained our DC Public Library staff on teaching these classes to our public. So the main thing is teaching critical thinking skills, really, rather than specific tools, because the tools are going to change, but the concepts of these topics won't change or disappear, right? So the main thing that we kind of teach them how to do is like evaluate things, right? Like evaluate software and formats, your social media sites and storage platforms. So, and always with this preservation goal in mind to meet long-term needs. And I like to regularly say, like, we take care of our bodies and ourselves and our health. And that's an ongoing thing. It's not like you eat a salad once and run a mile and then you're done for a few years. Like the same thing goes with digital preservation. You have to, it's something that you have to keep doing. And that's where the memory lab is, and our classes are a really important part of learning how to do that, and then making connections to with people who can teach you and answer questions to help you. So I have to say also, like, Digital Preservation 101 is very much based on photos, And then our digital estate planning, they had to change the name from digital estate planning to your digital afterlife or something like that, because people thought that they were gonna like have a lawyer was gonna be there and that they were gonna walk away with the will. So a really key thing about everything Memory Lab 2 is managing people's expectations. So, that was a lesson learned. And we also added on there after I joined on, since I've got that AV archivist background, we added Preserve Your Home Movies class as well, really based off of like the kind of curricula that Jamie already set up with digital preservation, just popped in some information about home movies. And events that you can have, I am really trying to get our partners to do home movie days. And these are annual events typically in October that celebrate watching home movies together as a community. So obviously this is such a obvious connection with a memory lab, since people are typically bringing in home movies and digitizing them on as far as the VHS goes. So that's something to be aware of. And we are definitely, I know Pamela is on the board of the Center for Home Movies. So we're trying to connect more of people who do home movie days across the country with their local memory labs to just form partnerships, because we'll talk more about partnerships and the importance of that soon. But other things that we do, community scanning days, preservation workshops. We have these, I have here the Maximum Preservation Zine. We have 3 preservation zines that we made that are just very easily, you can print them out, and they have really basic preservation information. One is on your physical stuff, one is on digital files, and then one is on home movie preservation. So it's just something that you can print out and give to people at events, and to help them either remember you and think about a memory lab, and then to just like jot down notes and to just continue thinking about their personal archives. Next. So how exactly does our memory lab work? It's do it yourself, as I mentioned, and I repeat this over and over because that's really important to make clear to people. You are not digitizing this for them. They're doing it themselves, and they're learning these skills and working with technology hands-on. So this screenshot here is our booking form, and we, as I said, you book an appointment at the lab through our central reservation system, which is Acuity, is the scheduling software that we use. And we also hold orientations twice weekly for folks specifically who are nervous about getting started initially, but now it's going to be for everyone. It's just going to be like, let's get the questions out of the way and get you feeling really good and motivated to use the memory lab and use it properly. So users are responsible for their storage. They take their files with us. We have signs all over the memory lab that say your files will be deleted. You need, at the end of the day, you need to, or as soon as you log off, you need to take that with you. And we recommend an external hard drive, and we have information on the LibGuide that tells people how to format their hard drive properly so that it will work on both a Mac, either a Mac or an Apple computer or a Windows-based computer. So we have those instructions. They're pretty clear for people. But then we have the computers are hooked up to Wi-Fi. So if they want to drop things in their cloud storage, that's also a possibility. But with the 3-hour appointment, and you're relying on internet speeds, and these can be large files if they're video, we really don't necessarily recommend that. We also have a waiver, as I mentioned, where you have to check in at the reference desk when you arrive, and then the librarian makes sure that there is a waiver that you have signed before you use the lab. And this is just a one-page document with lots of words that is very legalese. So you have to, and we give an example of it. It's on our website, so you can see an example and probably run it by your general counsel or whatever to make sure it covers everything. But if you have any kind of equipment that the public uses, you typically have this kind of waiver. We also have an exit questionnaire, asking for more demographic information from our users. And, that's, they can fill that out or not, but it really can give information on our users and to further help us with outreach to make sure that we are, letting people know from across the city and from across all of our users, we're letting people know about the Memory Lab and they're aware and using it. Next. So staffing and sustainability is really important. We have 26 branches in DC Public Library, and staff are leading classes across those branches. And I do have to say that lab staff, the labs department at DC Public Library, no more sides. The labs department is really who's in charge of the Memory Lab. But it is, they manage appointments and troubleshoot the equipment. And there's one labs librarian that is really in charge of the Memory Lab and is the one that is typically doing the troubleshooting. And they're the one also that are like training the trainers, right? And teaching the librarians to then teach these classes and take them out to the other 25 locations of our libraries. And we have working groups. So if that's something your library does, maybe set up a working group for your Memory Lab that has different stakeholders. So for us, it's our labs department, and then also our special collections department, which is called the People's Archive. So, anyone that might be able to help with personal archiving and or, IT could be also someone to throw in there with your working group. We have this cool thing at DCPL called SMART goals, where you basically, everybody has to have these goals for the year, where they get assigned to a specific job where they get to learn more about other departments at DC Public Library. So it's outside of their department. They're learning new skills that they typically don't do in their day-to-day operations. So it's a professional development thing. And then they're literally just helping to further that department and DCPL's mission. So one of those is a digital preservation SMART goal. And we've had actually over 65 at this point, DC Public Library staff that's done the digital preservation SMART goal, and they get trained in teaching those classes that we have that I mentioned. And then they take those classes to their branch. And so that makes sure that we're teaching these classes, not just at the central library, right? Even though that's the only place that they can go for the Memory Lab, but we're at least getting the classes out there, the information, and people get to know more that the lab is available. And just, this is something also that we have to train, you have to build that in there, is troubleshooting. Equipment is gonna fail, software is gonna fail a lot. So you need to put this into your training as well. And thinking about, keeping your equipment up to date and maintained as well by your staff. Next slide. And I'll just briefly talk about outreach and promotion. It's really important to really integrate this part into whatever you do already at your library. And for us, with our launch event, think about when you're launching your lab. It's a big deal, so make a big deal about it. And it happened at the same time as Black History Month for us in 2016. So we made it part of the celebration of Black History Month, and had a screening with a with the filmmaker, and it was about Black photographers. And so obviously that hooks up with scanning your photographs at the Memory Lab. And also we did some genealogy things and family history events with that, and gave tours of the lab. So, work within your library with your, if you have a marketing or communications office or department, which we have. So do press releases, do media coverage as much as you can. People love talking about the Memory Lab and think that this is really cool when they know about it. So make sure that you let them know. You need to have a web page, a web presence, just to have information where people can contact more to learn more. We have postcards, as I mentioned, we have zines as well, but we have postcards that we hand out at any event that literally covers every question that people ask about the Memory Lab. Where is it? Do I need to bring my own, storage device? How much is a video? How many gigabytes is it? Those things. And that should be on the deep dive, or I will put it on the deep dive, an example so you can see what those typical questions are. Next slide. And part of, especially with partnerships in outreach, are really important, and the events part. So this is just a list of our partnerships that we had, and some of these actually brought money in too. One partner was so impressed by the Memory Lab that they donated money to it. So yeah, that's an exciting thing. So then I have pictures here of our Sun Cinema Home Movie Day events that we've had at least 3 at Sun Cinema, which is in Mount Pleasant in DC. And it's just, as you can see, a small venue that's like shows more like independent and art housey type films, but and it sort of like does a lot of community events too. And so we did our several home movie days there where we were bringing it outside of the library, right? And handing out postcards and handing out our zines, and people were really excited about the Memory Lab and they loved it, and it was so much fun. Next slide. So collecting local history really isn't DC Public Library's priority when it comes to the Memory Lab. The education and giving that preservation access really is. Most user materials aren't really in our scope, especially in DC, where a lot of residents actually aren't from DC, so they might be bringing in stuff that doesn't document DC, which is what we collect in our People's Archive. But we want to make sure that users are really educated about their options. That's the main thing, is giving people as much information. So we mention it in our exit survey, just being like, hey, if you have anything that you digitized today that you might want to donate, here's who you should contact. We also have literature, this flyer basically in the lab saying, do you have a DC story? Here's how you would reach out. And we've rebranded to the People's Archive, so we need to update this. And then we also do, like I said, community scanning days and going out to other places that where we do actually collect from those events. So we say, hey, we are collecting stuff about 1968 in Washington, DC. Please bring your photos. And then that gets put into the collection. Next slide. Oops.
Yeah,
this is you, Pamela.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that preservation is definitely a priority for the California State Library, which is where California Revealed comes in, because we are steadily supported by the State Library to help institutions with their preservation needs. So if the library is willing to keep copies of the files and hand them off to California Revealed, we would be able to take care of that, the long-term preservation and also online access as well. That's part of our service. So it's definitely something to consider for you all who want to collect local history, but need some sort of preservation backup plan. That's what we're here for. So I wanted just to give a shout out to California Revealed and all of the different libraries here on this list. This is actually just a sample, maybe half of the group of public libraries we help. And some of you are here in this room. So it's nice that it's all coming together. You can see that there are large parts of California that aren't represented. So it really is a hope of California Revealed to start collecting more people's history throughout the state through the memory labs. So I look forward to seeing how this would work and figuring out the forms and the understanding and the trust with the community to see if this will work. So we're here for you, and please reach out to me if you have any questions about partnership.
So just want to mention there are, each memory lab really is very unique. There's no memory lab looks the same. And even when, we moved our memory lab, it always looked very different. It's so dependent on so many different factors. And I just wanted to show several options here. Within our network on the bottom, we have Los Angeles Public Libraries, New Ulm in Minnesota, And then this was from DC Public Library in 2016, our memory lab. At the top, we have Queens College. This is a newer memory lab that I just love that illustration. I think it's adorable. This model is really, I just thought I'd throw out there because it's newer, and it's a partnership between Queens College in New York City, and they're partnering with the Queens Memory Project, which is at the Queens Public Library. So it's a public library and a college, and it's not open to the public, but it's open to students, professors, and anyone else within the college community. And you can use it, it's do it yourself, you can use it for free, but then they will, and the public can't use it, but they are going to open it up for planned community archiving days to use it. So, and they offer way more formats than a normal memory lab. So like more broadcast formats for AV and things like that. So I do have a link here in the slides just to let you guys know that you can check that out as another model.
So this is a newer kind of development for the memory lab, turning into kind of a curbside service because libraries are closed right now. And I don't know if others, out there are doing this. The only one that I know of is it's happening in Los Gatos, and I know Grace is here, so hi Grace. And I just wanted to put this up as a model that you all could try, or you're already trying, since we don't know how long libraries will be closed. This is something you can try. It's basically just adapting your on-site setup, but it's more do it for the patron, which kind of takes away, right, that initiative of teaching digitization and empowering people to take care of their own memories and preserve their own memories. But it's in response to the fact that we can't be together, and we want to keep our community safe. So in Los Gatos, this is just literally a screenshot from their website, and I have a link here if you want to check out kind of the way they have it set up. So basically, patrons email the library and they submit an inventory. The library will accept up to 1 shopping bag, which is quite generous. And literally, they arrange a drop-off time. They leave the bag there in the plaza, and then the librarian picks it up. And it's the same kind of setup where the users are responsible for storage, but if there is anything related to Los Gatos history, Grace will be happy to include it in the digital archive. So that's great. And there's a liability release, and she gives people an estimate of about 6 weeks. It is just a one librarian show here. So it's really, first come, first serve, and it's a pretty flexible turnaround time. But I know it's been quite popular, and Grace, feel free to fill in the blanks here. But I think it's wonderful that they're trying this, and she's happy to share documentation like the liability form and the inventory report, the exit survey, all of that kind of paperwork. I think she'd be happy to share. So I'm glad Grace could be here, and maybe there will be time at the end too to ask more questions about this. So yeah, please share if you're also trying this, because I think it's a great model. Back to the mobile.
Yes. So then another model that we're thinking about within the network is this mobile model where you pack up your memory lab and take it to different branches or different locations, community days, events, senior centers. And so at DCPL, we haven't done this yet, but many of our partners want it, as I mentioned. So I've been building resources as best I can to develop it. Next slide. And it will basically work the same way as our stationary lab, like a lot of what I talked about, signing up for an appointment, and it maintaining it as do it yourself, and all the same processes. But things to think about that are more issues that add to this are that it takes more time. So you're setting it up and breaking it down. it could be every day, right? Like if you're bringing it to a branch, I recommend that it's going to be there for a few days, not just like I go at the beginning of the day and after 8 hours we leave, because if they're just 3-hour appointments, you're getting like 2 people to use it, right? Is it worth your time to do that? And then setting up and breaking it down takes time. You're gonna have to, as you can see in this photo from a different, I'll talk about this a little bit more. It's a lot of little parts, cables, that you're gonna have to check every single time you pack this up. And then just to make sure that it didn't drop, someone didn't accidentally grab it and think that it was theirs for their external hard drive, whatever. And then it's going to take time to travel too. So think about that, putting that in. Don't do this outside. Don't do memory labbing outside. I tried that. Because it was a big event in DC, and it didn't go well. Like there was a major torrential rain. Please don't. So that's something to think about, and it's just not good for the equipment either to be outside typically. There's also, like, as I said, like if it's an 8-hour day and you have to factor in that time for setting up and breaking down, there's going to be less output, like less users are going to use it. So that's just something to think about. And maybe you plan that in where you say, well, we're here for a week at this branch, and then we'll move on to another branch or something. So you really have to buffer that a bit of time. And there's increased failure and troubleshooting because you are moving the equipment, which while we definitely try and in the list of equipment, like say like all of these very important cases that are expensive but integral to protecting, there's just increased potential for, every time you unplug something in your system, there's a potential for you to have plugged it in wrong, or maybe the wire isn't working anymore because you keep plugging it in and out. And then, so there's more troubleshooting regularly every time you unplug something. If you're moving things, a button could get pushed in that then throws everything off. And there's increased risk of damage of your equipment. So just things to think about with a mobile model. Next slide. The equipment list that I mentioned, for the mobile memory lab, for our partners, we have different versions of equipment lists based on what you need and what your resources are. So there's the Lite, Memory Lab Mobile Lite, which has a VHS deck and a scanner, not the fancy scanner that that is not mobile. So it's just less fancy, but still with this version, you still have a SVHS deck and a computer for that small, but it's basically you'd be rolling around 2 of those large Pelican cases and an over the shoulder bag. So like basically what you see pictured here. And then that costs about $5,600. And now that was in the fall, actually. I need to recount because it changes all the time. The cost just, typically they just go up. But in the fall, it was $5,600. So, and then if you want to keep it cheap and light, and this cost would be about $3,800, where you don't get like a fancy VHS VCR. You just have that real basic one. And so it's basically just one rolling Pelican case, and a Pelican case is one of those bigger cases that you see here. And then an over the shoulder bag, like what you see. And then you just carry the VCR, right? Because it's a cheap VCR. So we don't really care if it gets damaged because you've got a million other ones. And you just like carry it in a box that you have or something that you can very easily find, right? So a full lab is actually a full mobile lab is actually more like a little over $8,000. So that's like kind of exactly what a stationary lab costs too. So it's not like it's cheaper, but so this would give you SVHS and VHS, a monitor, a CRT monitor, but you don't need to know what that is right now. But so it's 2 rolling cases, you carry the monitor, and then 2 over the shoulder bags. Okay. So it's sort of, you just add an over the shoulder bag here and then another carrying thing. So that would be really a 2-person, like how many people are, carting this around. It's really more like 2 people. Yeah. Next slide. And so this is out of University of Wisconsin, which was what that other photo was of all those parts. Is they have the Proud and Pravda that they put together. And just to let you know that this is an option where they actually mail these out, and they use Pelican cases as well to protect everything. So I don't know a lot about this model. I just know that it has been around a while. And so you could potentially reach out to them to be like, whoa, mailing it out, like, is this something that, you know, I don't know if anyone would ever like check a case out to a customer, but maybe that's something that you could potentially look into, and then let me know how that goes. So next slide. So I did want to mention the model by Frederick County Public Library in Maryland. They actually took the original documentation that Jamie made for our memory lab at DCPL and the documentation that I mentioned at the University of Wisconsin, the Proud and the Pravda, and they mushed them together and made their own mobile memory lab. Open memory lab is also what they call it. And because Frederick County is a very rural county in Maryland, very large, so they wanted to be able to very easily have their memory lab travel from branch to branch. So there's pictures here of it all packed up, and then also it in use. And the main thing about this is actually it's less of a do-it-yourself model. It's much more hand-holding by the librarian that travels around with the lab. So they do allow drop-ins. You can drop in and bring your stuff, and it seems to be going okay, but also keep in mind this is more of a rural library system, so there might be like less people. If it might not work as much in an urban library system if there's, you know, a large population of people. You don't really want people waiting, and Frederick County hasn't really had to deal with the waiting. We've met multiple times with the librarian Becca that is in charge of this, so she's shared a lot of experiences with us because we're so intrigued into the mobile option. So we would definitely still keep the idea of like making appointments, so that way people just fully understand how long they're going to have to be there. They're still getting that that aspect where they are learning how to use the equipment, which for the network we really prioritize within the grant, right? So we have to make sure that we uphold that. So yeah, so that's probably the biggest difference, is the lack of it's more, they still do it with this, but it's more held by the librarian than we typically do. So that is that model. Next. Planning is so important in building your memory lab. I can't I can't like highlight this enough, that you're gonna have to do some soul searching. Just kind of get yourself in a space where you're really being honest about what your resources are, about what your community needs are, and about all of these different categories of things that you need to think about and that need to be in place for you to know what your memory lab is going to look like and to make decisions about it. So that is how we formulated that questionnaire to ask these questions, so that then you ask these questions of yourself. If you don't know the answers, then you seek out who has those answers and find them, and then that will help you to know how to build your memory lab.
Yeah, and I'll send a link out to the planning form with the series of questions that Siobhan put together, so you all can start working on that right after the webinar. Maybe you'll be inspired. That'll be great. So it's now time for questions and comments. Please don't be shy about asking questions. I know that there are some questions that have built up in the chat. So I'm going to bring Allison back. And I don't know if anyone can see the Q&A box. That's another place to put questions. I haven't seen any questions come up there, but what are you seeing, Allison?
Sorry about that. We had a question from Chris. He was curious how to get into the Slack chat.
Right, so that I will be given emails from partners, right, that are going to be part of the California Memory Lab group. And so then I will add your email to the Slack. If you don't want to join the Slack, that's fine to just ignore my invitation. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And if you want to make sure that your email is included, contact Pamela or just directly contact me, which my contact will be coming up shortly.
We also had a couple questions from Kathy. The first one she asked was, how is privacy assured for the patrons that use the Memory Lab? Is the work saved on the transfer machines or is it deleted at the end of the day?
Yes, it's deleted at the end of the day. Or really it's deleted as soon, every time that a user is finished with the lab, they are logged out. The librarian in charge of it logs them out, and as soon as they're logged out, there's an automatic feature that wipes the computer, the hard drive. So, and there we have it all over the lab saying, take your files with you, they will be deleted.
And is that also in the agreement too, Siobhan, when they sign up?
It is mentioned, I don't know if it's in the agreement, because the agreement is more like liability, like if you get hurt or if your tape gets damaged sort of thing. Yeah, it's been a while since I read that very long legal document, but yeah. It is definitely in the, like, when you sign up for the appointment, you get an email reminder and it says it in there multiple times. We mention this. So, and then the privacy aspect to which you asked about. I mean, so this is something in considering your physical space. You want, I think it's always best to have something that's semi-private. So unfortunately, when it was at Northeast Library, it was not very private at all. So people could literally like watch over your shoulder what you were digitizing. So that was not ideal, but it was the best we could do in the small branch. So in the old MOK and then newer as well, it's in an area that like it's in a room that has a window, so the library staff can see in, but like it's still an element of privacy. Where, and we'll probably put like some curtains, but not still see through, because you want to be able to still see and make sure that it's a safe space. Because if you have multiple people in there, I think people want to feel like they're being they do want to feel like that people can see them. And then also, like, you want to make sure that your equipment is staying there and things like that, not being put in someone's bag or anything. So privacy it's a tough one. Also, you got to think about what your policies of difficult material. People have asked, like, what do you do if there's porn, if they're digitizing porn? What are your porn policies? Just do the same thing. Like, you've got a computer lab, I'm sure you have a policy on porn. So then you got to put that into just have that at the ready and have your staff be prepared to know how to answer when something like that happens, right? Just kind of think about all the possibilities out there, and keep tissues handy as well. We have a box of tissues in our memory lab for people who regularly cry when they're like watching these home videos that they haven't seen in a really long time. It's actually happens way more often than you think. So that's something that's like very touching and but practical as well.
Okay, Kathy had a couple more questions. Folks were kind enough to chime in the chat, but maybe we can talk about them real quick. She had a question about if 35 millimeter from camcorder mini tapes could be transferred.
Sorry, the question is if 35 millimeter can be transferred?
Yes.
35 millimeter film cannot be transferred. So well, I mean, it can be transferred somewhere, but not on a memory lab. If you have 35 millimeter film, that's like home movies were not recorded on 35. That's more like what they showed at movie theaters. So you probably don't have 35 millimeter motion picture film. You probably have 35 millimeter slides, like a single slide or negative, and that can be done on the scanner. But the station, like the still images. But if you have a moving image, none of the, like at DCPL, our memory lab does not do any moving image film, motion picture film at the moment. Several of our partners have purchased a Wolverine machine, which does 8mm film and super 8mm film scans, low resolution, but it's safe. I have tested it, and it's safe on the film as long as the film is not too degraded. And it also, if the film has a soundtrack, it doesn't transfer soundtrack. So that's, I think it's somewhere around $800 to buy one of those. So that's something that you could add in if you find the, money somewhere. We don't have as much documentation on that. I do have a tutorial showing how to load the Wolverine and things like that on our resources. So just because I was excited to play with it at LA Public Library, and wanted to show others how to use it.
Great. And Kathy's other question was, do you have samples of your PR and outreach?
Yes. So I can give we have an example of our postcard, and like all the, which I think is good to look at because it does show you what the frequently asked questions are, because I tried to answer them, and it's amazing what that does. And maybe your community will have a few different questions, but that you can put on your card. And as far as within the Slack channel, there are like some flyers and things that people posted across the network of their classes coming up and how they marketed them. I think we've put in some press releases and things like that. So yeah, it's if you're looking for something specific, let me know, and then I can cobble that together. Or if you have ideas of what would be helpful, then I can put that into the deep dive.
Thank you, Siobhan, so much.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the final question, if I missed one, please let us know. People are asking the date and time for the next webinar.
Next one is going to be February. Oh gosh, did I lose the note here? Okay, February 12th. It's a Friday. All the webinars are Friday at the same time, 10 a.m. And they're running about an hour and a half just to allow time like this for questions and discussion. And another question too I have for you all is maybe enabling video too, so it could be more of a discussion. I didn't want to put everyone on the spot because I didn't say that at the beginning, but we can make this more of a conversation too as we go along and go deeper into these like very specific topics. I think that's, if we can try to simulate being together, it would be nice to see each other too. So like next month, we can make it more open with video and conversation. You can also opt out of video too. Are there any other questions? We have about 10 more minutes, so don't be shy. And if anyone's willing to share, particular challenges around building, maintaining if you're already up and running. And I think sustainability is a big question. It's kind of ongoing question for everybody too.
I did want to throw out, I'm seeing a few things in the chat, just like mentioning all of these different AV formats. This is the question that you might find that your community is like, oh my gosh, all we have is mini DV. So you'll definitely want to have mini DV, but for the most part, everyone has VHS. So that's why everyone in our Memory Lab network has the ability to do VHS. That's what we're focusing on. But there are so many video formats out there. In my home movie preservation slide deck, which I will look, since I have 10 minutes, I'm going to look that up and then put the link to the slide deck in here. I walk through identifying the most popular audiovisual formats for home movies. The most popular ones. There are more than the ones that I mentioned, but even the ones that I mentioned can get overwhelming for folks. So where I see some like, is it 8mm video? Is it mini DV? Many of them look very similar. Most of the time it's just the logo that you're gonna look at that's gonna tell you the difference. But I try and give tips on how to identify those, because identifying what you have is the key first step before you go into a memory lab, because you don't want to bring in an 8mm video or a high 8 tape and they can't digitize that. So yeah, it's an important point.
We've actually had 2 more questions come in. The first one from Grace. She said she's had a hard time getting the antiquated pieces of equipment like camcorders and VCRs. Any tips or pointers for her?
Yes, I would say have you reached out to local audio and video engineers? Then mostly the easiest way to do that is by contacting your local TV stations and radio stations. Usually if you just say, hey, we're just looking for old equipment, we'll come and get it. And all you have to do is just show us where it is. That has produced the best results for us as far as donations go. Now, I think asking your public for consumer VCRs could be very helpful, because it just depends on the community, but most people have stuff in their garage and their basements and things like that like old consumer VCRs were pretty popular. So that's something the local TV stations, and then on the deep dive, like we do have a lot of information about finding vendors. I think Pamela is going to be coming up with like a kind of more of a structured list of vendors that you guys can look through and use, which is not something necessarily we have, because choosing a vendor, it can get really sticky. Each public library is very different based on their purchasing, rules and regulations. Jonathan has experience in contacting TV stations, hit or miss. It's an avenue to pursue. Think about the student, or local colleges and universities. If they have any kind of mass media or communications or film program, which a lot do these days, ask them as well. So and just ask people to put the feelers out there for donations.
I think too, in some cases, libraries have inherited an AV tech along with the equipment donation, like someone who's really enthusiastic about the technology and wants to help even set it up. I think that's happened for some people who've gotten lucky finding the retired AV technician who really misses this kind of work.
Exactly. Yeah, or someone that it's a hobby or something. Yeah.
Great. We had a question from Olivia. She said, do you ever have Born Digital info sessions for the public?
So yes, this is actually and I can provide these. I'm trying to think of where I should put them on our deep dive, but this is more through the People's Archive at DC Public Library. We recently did, because we were trying to move more virtual programming, we did a Digital Preservation 101 class. So those slides I would love to share with you all. I do have to just give some feedback of it is a lot to ask people. We did Digital Preservation 101 in an hour, and digital preservation is such a huge topic. I don't know how we did it in an hour. And then also it was just crickets when it was done. Everyone, I think, was just absorbing so much info. So, you can always take those slides and divide them up into a series of classes, which is probably the better way to do it. But yeah.
It would be great. I was going to say it would be great, Siobhan, if you'd be willing to share slides from different workshops, or others, here, if they'd be willing to share, we could put them in a collection.
Yeah, I just put a link to the slide decks that we've done more for the Memory Lab Network, which includes that home movie preservation one, but that I will add the Digital Preservation 101 to that. So then you guys can have access to that there.
Thank you, that's great.
Yeah.
I believe that's all we have for questions. Unless we miss someone, please let us know.
We have 5 minutes. Let's make the most of it.
Yeah, I want to, Todd made a good point. When we're thinking about getting donations, again, back to that question of that the recycling center helped them out. Also, we're all part of the public library is part of municipal government. Is there somewhere within the municipal government that might have this equipment, reach out to them. Maybe there's a surplus, right? Like a local surplus that you could at least get things cheaper. Thank you, Jonathan, put his contact info there. Can you talk a little bit about staff training on the Memory Lab? Yeah, is there something specific that you want to know, Chris? Because I could just go.
There will be a session on that topic,
yeah,
specifically. Yeah, but no, please go ahead, Siobhan.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, the staff training for the Memory Lab at this point, it's been kind of all over the place. I think one thing I'd like to, because we've moved it around so much, so it is important to have one staff member be the lead of the just to have a person that people know that's who I ask the questions, you know, to, and because at one point we kind of had a little bit of it, you know, it was unclear who exactly that person was with the DC Public Library for a little bit, and that really, some things like slipped through the cracks. So once it was clearer, things are much more smooth. And I would say one of the best tools to teaching staff and training staff on the Memory Lab is paying them. It's on staff work time, where they bring in their own home movies, their own slides and photos and negatives, and digitize their personal archives, because it really gives them that buy-in of like, they feel that like emotion, they connect with it. They're like, whoa, actually, this is really cool. I want to help people more. Whereas sometimes it's like, if they're a librarian, you know, just working the reference desk, and they're not a more technical person, it just like not really understanding what the lab does, then it's not super helpful to the patron. But giving them that time to use it for themselves really helps. Does PR work? Oh, I thought that was a follow-up to that. But so does PR work well if you focus on individual various topics? There are so many memories to choose from, like baby pics, grandparents' travels, etc. Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, it definitely does help if you have, I mean, especially if you're trying to collect from something, if you say around an event, right? Like a local event, if it's an anniversary coming up, then you say, bring your photos from this event that happened, or this place, a landmark that you're trying to document maybe. Yeah, I think giving examples is very powerful, and it connects with people. And that's where I think that at a later date, you guys will be talking about evaluation, right, Pamela? So, and I mean, I talk ad nauseum about evaluation in the deep dive, but one thing that I regularly try and say is like, yeah, we're trying to keep statistics, like how many people are coming in, how long are they coming in, what formats are they digitizing, more demographic information too. But then you want to collect information from your users that is more qualitative, and what is like their experience, like what are they crying about too, right? Like why are they using the tissue, like what are they digitizing and what does it mean to them? Because you want to have that information for future grant proposals that you might write. So you have a quote from a user that says, this is how I use this specifically, and this was the value that it gave to me in my life. So those are things that you should, and I think evaluation and planning for evaluation should start early in the process, and not be something that you're kind of catching up on after you've had hundreds of people into your lab and things like that. So, and that's where that kind of evaluation does feed well into PR as well, where you can put that on your, you know, on your marketing materials and or press releases. And if the press comes calling, they always want to ask for a user. So you want to maybe have like some users that say, yeah, I would love to talk about the Memory Lab.
Yeah, those are great suggestions. And this will also feed into your planning, right? Right at the beginning is like defining your audience and their needs. Like really think about, and you could even do a survey, like it could be informal or as formal as you want. So I think asking these questions around evaluation, like start evaluating your goals now, so that you can then have these kind of some sort of system of metrics to measure, right, your success against. So yeah, I think we got through all the questions, did we?
Great.
So good, 11:30 on the dot. Siobhan, thank you so much for coming and helping us start this up, and really awesome questions. Thank you everyone for coming. This is our contact information, so please reach out. As registrants for this, you're on our list, so we'll send out the Slack invites and keep the conversation going. And hopefully see you in February. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. Please feel free to reach out, and I look forward to hearing about your memory labs.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.